Multilante by Starlight. Fandom Eclipse. Read by My Lost and Found. Summary. Izuku was debating the merits of seeking out the new vigilante group that was on the news when he heard the list of known members. He knew those names. Specifically, he knew those because they were assigned to 6 of his hoodies. He knew he should come clean, maybe just stick to one costume, or stop being a vigilante altogether. Groups were treated much more seriously than lone entities, and he could get in serious trouble if they sent heroes after him expecting backup that didn't exist. A week later, he had characters designed for every hoodie he owned, in which Izuku becomes a one-man organization and everyone has to deal with the consequences. This fic is about 14,000 words long and 1 chapter, but this will be split into 3 separate parts. As always, link to the fic is in the description below, and on with the story. Izuku had no idea how he'd been driven to this. Well, that wasn't entirely true. Technically, it started when he was diagnosed quirkless at 4, and everyone in his life seemed to collectively lose faith in him. Or it could have been when All Might himself told him to give up and left him alone on a rooftop. Maybe when he, still quirkless, passed UA's hero exam only to be expelled on the first day after automatically failing a quirk apprehension test by nature of not having a quirk. Anyone else would have cited any of the many misfortunes of Midoriya Izuku's life as reason to give in. But if you asked him, Izuku would say he blamed everything about his current situation on the day his father tried to convince him to change his fashion sense. He was 10, and his personal wardrobe consisted entirely of hero brand clothing and tacky t-shirts that, at the time, he thought were genius and peak comedy. His stance has not changed, but he's much quieter about it now. For some reason, his father attempted to argue in favor of business suits to an elementary schooler, citing their general respected role in society. It was an hour-long voice call that ended dramatically when Izuku said that a hoodie over a shirt and sweatpants was essentially the same thing. In most families, the conversation would have ended after that. But Hasashi Midoriya had always been petty, so when he sent his son a bright yellow duck hoodie, it was supposed to be satire, something in the spirit of Diogenes presenting a plucked chicken to Plato, declaring the newly featherless, and probably very displeased, biped a man. He wasn't expecting Izuku to fall in love with the soft polyester, much less receive multiple photos of Izuku wearing it in his daily life. At the time, he cut his losses and declared it a win, as he started referring to Izuku as his ducky. Unfortunately for what could have been a happy ending, Izuku forgot 2 things. Polyester melts when it's ignited, and his ex-childhood friend hated him. The only reason Izuku didn't suffer permanent damage from the burns was their family doctor, who was coming to pick up his grandson from the park the afternoon it happened. When Izuku woke up in the doctor's back room, the first thing he heard was his father's worried voice asking what happened. His mother wasn't there. He hoped it was just because the doctor found his father on his file's emergency contact first, and nothing else. He never asked. A few days later, the Midoriya household received 4 large boxes, one with black long-sleeve shirts, one with black pants, one with miscellaneous pieces including black socks and gloves, and the last containing a quite frankly ridiculous number of animal-themed hoodies in rainbow colors, all fireproof, as well as resistant to just about anything that could possibly be a threat to Izuku. Izuku once joked that, wearing everything his dad sent, he was better protected than even those treasures the bad guys in cartoons kept in vaults. His father had only laughed, agreeing before asking more about his week. In his honest opinion, that was the start of this mess. Izuku wasn't sneaking out the night after he got removed from UA's hero course. He was simply taking a midnight stroll to clear his mind, far from his neighborhood, and avoiding the main roads. He left out of his bedroom window. He didn't plan to interrupt a mugging, but at least his skin was completely covered by his clothes. Even his face was protected. This hoodie could be zipped up fully to reveal a cat face over his real one. It was breathable and didn't hinder his vision, so Izuku would happily walk around in it when he didn't want his face to be recognized. Helping up the nice lady he saved with gloved hands, Izuku was about to leave when she stopped him. "What's your name? I don't think I've heard of you before." Thinking fast, he gestured wordlessly to his face. "Kuroneko?" A little more detailed than he anticipated, but Black Cat would work. He nodded before walking deeper into the alley from where he had came from. He was halfway home when it hit him. The greatest idea he'd had in his entire life. Across Japan, a number of people experienced a sudden feeling of dread. The part where things got complicated was about a week later. Someone at UA messed up his paperwork and actually expelled him instead of just moving him to a different course, so Izuku saw no reason to end his nightly routine. His cat hoodie was in the wash. Even immortal clothing needs to be cleaned. But he didn't let that stop him. He wasn't doing this for his image, and even if his vigilante name didn't make sense that night, it wasn't like there were a lot of people stopping crime in animal hoodies. So he threw on his bunny hoodie and departed, confident that he would still be recognized as the same vigilante as the nights before. It wasn't a problem until after he was clearing up a fight. He was just so used to gesturing to his hood when asked for his name, that it wasn't until he already nodded that he processed he was given a new name. Oh well, police would probably figure out it was the same person, even if he was now Green Rabbit. They didn't. Izuku only found out about the problem a month later, when he was spying on the police station instead of eating lunch and enjoying his accidental gap year. His attention was caught when they mentioned a sudden spike in the number of vigilantes on the streets. Izuku was debating the merits of seeking out the supposed group when he heard the list of known members. He knew those names. Specifically, he knew those names because they were assigned to 6 of his hoodies. Rationally, he knew he should come clean. Maybe just stick to one costume or stop being a vigilante altogether. Groups were treated much more seriously than lone entities, and he could get in serious trouble if they sent heroes after him expecting backup that didn't exist. But a small, bitter part of him thought about all the people that called him useless. Every person that told him there was no way for a quirkless person to be a hero, or be anything worthwhile at all. A part of him that wished he had never idolized All Might for his smile, or Eraserhead for his quirkless fighting style, that wanted to prove everyone that ever hurt him wrong. That night, he came to the conclusion that pettiness probably runs in the family. A week later, there were characters designed for every hoodie he owned. The Hoods? What kind of organization name is that?
Hey, I'm just telling you what I read in the news. Apparently, the police don't know much about them, or even how many of them there are. Just that there's a group of vigilantes in animal sweatshirts roaming the streets.
Just sweatshirts? I get that everyone has their own aesthetic, but that's just lame. Hitoshi sighed, shifting his stance on the train as he waited for it to arrive at its stop. He felt like all anyone was talking about today was the vigilante group that the news covered on the morning program. Singular, one-time vigilantes were fairly common, but a whole group showing up out of nowhere was nearly unheard of. He didn't expect them to be active long. With this much attention, heroes would be actively hunting them down just for the fame associated with the group. Apparently, the Hoods had been around for 2 months now, officially lasting longer than the average vigilante. There were at least 6 of them spotted across Japan, all at different times of day and dealing with different types of crime. It seemed impossible for anyone to get as much done as these people, even working together in a group. Hitoshi was already exhausted between regular schoolwork and catching up in training after transferring to Class 1A following the sports festival. He couldn't imagine working as a vigilante while still maintaining any kind of civilian life. It would have taken longer to transfer, but there was already an empty seat after a student got expelled on the first day. How lucky. The train rolled into the station, and Hitoshi's mind soon shifted towards dinner and homework as he made his way home. He would probably stay in his room for the night, though depending on what was in the fridge, he could grab leftovers from yesterday before studying. It's been a while since I last fed the strays. Maybe I can grab a few cans of cat food from the corner store and set it by the alley before going home. Nodding to himself, Hitoshi took a detour. The store wasn't far from the station, and soon he walked to the alley behind the laundromat that the stray cats liked to sleep in. At one point, he could have sworn he felt someone watching him, but he dismissed the thought. He was probably still twitchy from school. All his classmates were so loud and had no sense of personal space. It was a wonder any of them had the energy for actual lessons. Upon entering the alleyway, Hitoshi tensed. Something was wrong. There wasn't any sign of the cats, even though there was almost always at least one around this time of day. Before he had time to do anything, investigate, leave, call out to the cats, something solid hit him in the head, and the world went black. Hitoshi would like the world to know that when he complained about being tired, that wasn't an invitation to knock him out. When he woke up, it was to a killer headache, a blindfold, something restraining him, and yelling. He probably would have done something stupid like tell whoever it was to quiet down, but he was stopped by a suspiciously metal clang, silencing the last of it. Was that a fight? He hoped whoever won would untie him, or at least ignore him and leave. Wait. Holy shit, did he get kidnapped? In his defense, he was occupied by his headache. Ow.
Hey, you okay?
A deep male voice that had no right to be so nice-sounding asked from somewhere on his left. Hitoshi would have liked to respond. Is that what Ashido meant when she described how good his voice was for his quirk? Not that he was listening. But it was at that point he noticed the gag in his mouth. Thankfully, the mystery guy had that handled, gloved hands gently removing the ropes.
Close your eyes. I'm removing the blindfold, and we're under a street light.
Nodding, which was a bad idea. Did he mention he had a headache? Hitoshi kept his eyes closed, letting them slowly adjust before looking around. There was a white van pulled into a side road he didn't recognize, and at least 5 guys knocked out on the ground around him in various states of bruised, but surprisingly not too bloody. But what got his attention was the vibrant purple raccoon hoodie his savior was wearing. He probably should have asked the time. The sun was gone, so it was probably well past his curfew. Location, or really anything else. But what came out was, "Hey, we match." The man chuckled.
That we do, though your eye bag shouldn't be nearly as dark as mine. How are you holding up, kid? Anything broken?
No, I'm just sore.
Thanks.
Raccoon Man nodded.
Good. The authorities should be here right about...
Hitoshi heard sirens from somewhere behind him, and turned to see the flashing lights.
Now. Stay safe, kiddo.
He turned back to say something, but the man was already gone. He didn't have any time to process how he vanished into thin air. Like a street magician that was actually a pickpocket with an illusion quirk, and look, your wallet is missing. Before the vehicles started to arrive and people began apprehending the bad guys and examining Hitoshi for injuries. He lost the cat food. Momo wasn't sure if choosing to intern with Uobami was the best idea. Not that she couldn't learn anything from the Snake Hero. It was just that they spent more time on the celebrity side of heroics. Even patrols were mostly her and Kendo standing back as Uobami was swarmed by fans. Momo wasn't stupid. She knew what people thought of her looks and expected of her career. She knew why the costume manufacturers made her hero outfit the way it was. Momo knew most of her hero work would be on the publicity side of things. She knew it was worthless for her to train physically when she wouldn't be out on the field too often. She was going to be a rescue hero anyway. She didn't know what else she could do when she clearly wasn't suited for combat. A hum made her look up from her lap. Uabami had stopped fixing her makeup in favor of watching the news. It was civilian footage of someone in a yellow canary hoodie helping a kid on a playground, who was clutching their knee and crying. The person had a sweet, feminine voice, introducing herself as Kiro and distracting the kid as she pulled first aid supplies from her sleeves. It was a nice interaction, but not one Momo had expected to be on Hero News. At least, she didn't think so, until there was a commotion and the camera turned to show a man yelling at a woman. From the audio, it was something about a divorce and him not getting custody of the child behind her. The woman was shouting something about a restraining order, which angered the man, if the way his arms turned to wood was any indication. Just as he lunged at her, the man suddenly froze and collapsed. The camera whipped back to Kiro, who was lowering a dart gun that she seemed to have summoned from thin air. The vigilante, because that's what she was, jogged over to the mother and talked for a bit. The video ended when Kiro sprinted away as the authorities arrived on the scene. Momo looked back at her mentor for a reaction. Uabami looked contemplative for a moment before she nodded in approval. That's a girl who knows how to use her charm. Huh? Thankfully, Kendo was just as lost as she was at hearing anything positive about a vigilante from a pro hero. This kiddo always has the moral high ground. The video started by demonstrating her kindness, showed she could be a fierce protector when she needs to be, and ended with her comforting the civilian. Honestly, the only thing she did wrong was not try to de-escalate with words, and how she left the perpetrator unrestrained on the scene. But those can be excused. Notice anything about the end? She ran away at the last second? Momo offered hesitantly. Nobody tried to stop her. There were dozens of adults watching, and not one tried anything against her, despite Kiro arguably being a threat. I would bet good money that the police weren't called for the vigilante, but for the fight she stopped. Kendo nodded. It was a park, and all the parents watching were fine with her being near the kids. And the tranquilizer dart was a show of strength without any threatening or violence that would scare the children, Momo added with wide eyes. Exactly. The level of thoughtfulness in addition to the display of trust is better publicity than any modeling job or interview. It was an unplanned show of character, and Kiddo passed gracefully. Now, if only she would wear something nicer. I understand keeping a theme, but that hoodie doesn't do anything for her figure. Momo didn't mean to tune out, but she couldn't help it, as her mind kept wandering to the dart gun and bandages, both coming out of nowhere. It was like they were produced with a quirk. Heroes weren't allowed to carry guns in Japan unless they had a license, and hero students weren't allowed to access one unless it was related to their quirk. But if Momo could memorize the designs of a variety of ammunition types, she could hardly imagine the time and energy saved if all she had to do was carry a gun. It would be so much easier than having to try and make and lug around a large metal staff everywhere she went. While other weapons, like her favorite cannon, were still an option, a gun wasn't a bad backup plan. She'd have to ask her teachers when she got back from internships. For now, she mentally thanked Kiro for the inspiration and, though she wouldn't dare say it out loud, hoped she was safe and didn't get caught. Stain approached the two fake heroes laying on the asphalt before him. It was pathetic, honestly. He didn't expect much from the adult, but the child was a fool without the power to back his resolve. He raised his blade, ready to do his duty by his namesake and stain his hands with their blood. In another universe, another hero student would have intervened. If society was a little worse, another villain would have had the chance to step in to spare the kid. In a particularly cruel world, nobody would come, and Stain would gain 2 more kills that day. In this one, Stain didn't even have time to flinch before a cinder block was dropped on his head. Thankfully, the world of quirks meant Stain had enough physical durability to not be killed by the blow. He would wake in the hospital meant for villains to get treatment for his concussion before he was to be shipped away to Tartarus. Akagoro Chizumi had only one question: who was the hero who had defeated him? One of the nurses brave enough to do checkups while he was conscious informed him that it hadn't been a hero, but one of the hooded vigilantes. Specifically, a loud girl in a red Shiba Inu hoodie whose voice could be heard clearly in all the recordings, despite remaining on the rooftops, far from the reach of the heroes. Apparently, she claimed to be providing air support during the Nomu attack, evidence by when she knocked a winged one out of the sky with another cinder block that she threw from across the street. Akagoro was many things: an ex-hero student, an ex-vigilante, and now a soon-to-be imprisoned villain. But he was not a sore loser. He had heard of the alias of the vigilante who stopped him and saved lives in spite of the heroes, and he laughed harder than he had in years. Her name was Akka. A chat window was opened on 2 screens, both as well as untraceable by any normal means. There were probably quirks out there that could track them down, but neither had access to those quirks, and thus they were irrelevant. To anyone else, the conversation seemed nonsensical. Random files exchanged without a word, containing information that ranged from evidence of corrupt heroes to the activities and locations of trafficking rings. Even the chat name, Rodents, didn't really make any sense from an outside perspective. This would be because the real conversation took place on a somehow even more obscure server that was modified to contain dozens of worlds, where the two played a centuries-old game and took turns showing off their new creations. Rat God. Excellent work on that last design. I see you've improved since the last time we met. Hayata Nomosu.
Thank you. I found an old file where someone recreated the first Pokemon game in Minecraft, so I got inspired from that. It's an interesting mix of coding and circuitry, though I think I prefer designing monster farms. I'm sending you a file. Shiro was patrolling the same red light district from the earlier human trafficking ring that went underground. They're active again. I trust you'll send more subtle and capable heroes this time.
Rat God. Of course. Apologies again for the actions of Sir Night-Eye. I had not anticipated him going out to gather evidence in spite of what you had already granted us. Hayata Nomosu.
That man is a fool that has grown too dependent on perfection and the reliability of his own quirk. I understand that he's used to investigating people that need legal evidence to be properly tried, but that logic is for drugs, not living beings. His actions might have been forgivable if using foresight hadn't alerted the villains, causing the bad future he saw. On an unrelated note, if one of us has to encounter Night-Eye in person, would we be completely justified in responding to the way he withdrew from the case the moment he thought it would fail?
Rat God. I don't suppose that would have anything to do with the reports about a girl in a white sheep hoodie that broke Night-Eye's nose completely unprovoked. Hayata Nomosu.
I did say Shiro was handling most of the night's patrols this week. If Night-Eye tried to use his quirk on her, she simply responded to being grabbed by a strange man in a dark alley. It would seem that foresight fails when someone is capable of defeating you with their eyes closed.
Rat God. For having a sheep as her image, Shiro seems to be the most physically confrontational of your group. Hayata Nomosu.
I fail to see what sheep have anything to do with how Shiro handles herself.
Rat God. Simply that it must be difficult to remove so many bloodstains from white fabric. Hayata Nomosu.
Shiro is well practiced. It may simply be a girl thing, as they say.
Rat God. I see. Would you like to see my 2-scale recreation of the Hero Public Safety Commission headquarters? I was recently able to program villagers to go through an approximation of the monthly schedule, but there remains room for error in the timing and name tags. Hayata Nomosu.
I would love to.
And that's all for this recording. Oh, I'm so excited to be recording this fic. I love it. I read it a while ago, but in the Discord, someone recommended it to Podfic, and I was like, oh yeah, that one. It's been like maybe a year since I read it, and I was like, this is great. So, I was like, maybe I can actually squish this in the schedule. And I was able to. I'd asked for permission, they were like, yes, and I was like, hee, squish it in. And it's like, I still have one, two, three, maybe four podfics still recorded from Voice Team that I haven't, that are later on the schedule that haven't come out. So it's like, maybe I shouldn't, but I'm going to. It's more in the backlogs. It's a great fic. It's so funny how Izuku is just like, I'm gonna be a vigilante. Whoops, this is happening anyway. Hoodie time, and then it's like, a man, another man, a girl, and he just goes into it absolutely just full commits to the character. They have names, they have genders, they have personalities. Some of them throw bricks at people. Specifically Stain, he deserves it. Oh, it's great. I love this fic. And I'm excited to record the rest of it. It's been a while since I read it, so it's really fun rereading it with you guys. But yeah, that's all for this time. As always, link to the fic is in the description below. Go click on it, give a kudos to the original author, maybe leave a comment, or you can wait till it's finished to do that if you don't want any chance at spoilers or to be tempted to read the rest, because it's really good. Anyway, that's all for this time. I will see you guys next time.